the center of this sounding. Sounds may come from different locations, yet you are in the center of your aural field. It could be argued that you are also in the center of your visual field, but to see behind you requires you to move your gaze, to turn around to take in the whole. Try turning around. There is nothing to look at behind you, but you might notice that the sounds shift. You are in an ambisonic essay. It uses the 360 VR format as it enables dynamic audio that will respond to your spatial orientation. While no sense is completely separate, I have chosen to minimize visual distraction to allow you to focus more fully on spatial listening. From a pragmatic and prepositional perspective, we look at while we are in hearing and listening. However, from our position in our aural center, we can also listen in, or is it out? The curious ear, body, mind reaches out to sound, seeks to meet it. This is the difference between a passive hearing and an intentional listening. Salome Berglund says that we experience sound as a temporal relationship. This relationship is not between things, but is the thing, is sound itself. In listening, I am in sound. There can be no gap between the heard and the hearing. I find the total collapse of one into the other a little too confounding. I opt for a conspiratorial union. Like Pierre Schaeffer's correlation of the objet sonore and reduced listening, one finds its new purpose through the other. The sound becomes sound object, the hearer becomes intentional listener. I propose that this correlation can be described as sonorality. So, if we experience listening from within and in correlation with sound, how effective is it to theorize about it from without, to create a distance between the object of study and the student who listens? When I started travelling for research and art purposes, I developed a ritual of ascending tall buildings to view the city from above. Generally shunning such touristic activities, I surprised myself in this dedicated pursuit. The activities of the world below are rendered strangely mute, and the viewing places are also often hushed and quiet like a church. The occasional child's overexcited chatter as landmarks are identified and pointed to, fingers smearing the floor-to-ceiling window. Sometimes there is muzak, some form of ignorable sound, to soften the silence, to ease the vertiginous anxiety. In his text, Walking the City, Michel de Certeau talks of seeing Manhattan from the 110th floor of the World Trade Center. Its agitation is momentarily arrested by vision. A gigantic mass is immobilized before the eyes. This perspective, he says, transforms the world into a text that can be read. But de Certeau is skeptical of what is learned from above, warning that this scopic and Gnostic drive leads to a fiction of knowledge and reflects a desire to be a viewpoint and nothing more. I see now that my acts of ascent are a response to the dislocation I feel as a tourist unable to read the city on the ground. I ascend in an attempt to gain what Salome Verglen says is the knowledge through the distance and stability of the object that visuality offers. De Certeau contrasts the desire to be a viewpoint with that of the participant who walks the city down below. He calls these participants Wandersmänner, for wanderers, and says their bodies follow the thicks and thins of an urban text they write without being able to read it. But let us consider the position of the wanderer not as a point of view, but a position of listening. If the participant on the ground has no holistic vision, perhaps they should turn to the oral sense for orientation. As a tourist, overwhelmed by an accumulation of images in camera and memory, I prefer to record the sounds of a city on the ground, often using binaural microphones that are hidden in my own ears, recording an undeniably subjective position filtered by the shape of my own bones. It is through this listening, of which the recording is a byproduct, that I get closest to feeling like I am part, temporarily of course, of a place. It is through listening that I find a way of being within a foreign city. De Certeau says, their story begins on ground level with footsteps. They are myriad, but do not compose a series. Their swarming mass is an innumerable collection of singularities. It is true that the operations of walking can be traced on city maps in such a way as to transcribe their paths, but these thick or thin curves only refer, like words, to the absence of what has passed by. Surveys of routes miss what was. The trace left behind is substituted for the practice. To bring this back to writing about sonic art, the urge to map, categorize, taxonomize, to separate oneself from the sounds being studied, silences the richness of the experience of listening. For Verglen, mapping reflects a pragmatic visuality that she says offers a misleading sense of objectivity. She proposes that to engage meaningfully with the auditory realm, it requires an exploratory approach. Left in the dark, she says, I need to explore what I hear. Listening discovers and generates the herd. So instead of a cartographic paradigm, we might step back to the act of exploration itself. In his critique of the above and beyond pretense of objectivity and neutrality of modernism, literary critic W.V. Spanos proposes the alternate notion of the periplus. A periplus is an ancient Greek form that presents the itinerary of a journey, a mapping from within, from the point of view of the sailor on the sea. I begin from the pillars of Heracles in Europe, all the way to the pillars of Heracles in Libya, and all the way to the great Ethiopians. The pillars of Heracles are located opposite one another, and are separated from one another by a day's sail. From the pillars of Heracles, there are many Carthaginian trading stations, clay, high tides, and ocean. That was from the periplus of Pseudo-Scylax from the 4th or 3rd century BC. A periplus of a sonic experience parallels Berglund's suggestion of a narration of listening to sonic art, which she believes introduces the themes central to the philosophy of sound art: subjectivity, objectivity, communication, collective relations, meaning, and sense-making. But with the periplus, are we simply replacing a flat topography with linear sequentiality, and still limiting the formal potential of our alternate sound theory? Perhaps we can find an alternative to topography by considering tomography. A term from the medical sciences, tomography is the process of taking multiple scans or slices of the inside of something and compiling them into an accumulative image, clearly made of parts. It also allows an outside perspective from the inside. In this, we can find parallels in the epistemology of situated knowledges offered by Donna Haraway. She suggests that embedded knowledges are partial and located, offering greater context and transparent perspectives. Situated knowledges, an approach that acknowledges its location, challenges the notion of the God view that claims to understand everything from nowhere. By connecting these knowledges, these slices, we avoid solipsistic subjectivity and relativism that Haraway sees sitting on the opposite side of the coin to objectivity. Both, she says, deny the stakes in location, embodiment, and partial perspective. Both make it impossible to see well. Notice here we are back at the visual as the source of knowledge. An alternate theorizing of sonorality offers knowledge as understanding the negotiation of relations. Sonorality confounds clear binaries of subject-object, subjectivity-objectivity. Karen Berard, using quantum field physics as a metaphor, suggests that there is no inside and out, only multiple insides. Relations are not but intrasubjective, multiple, always shifting possible relations between insides. The thought figure of tomography focuses on the relations of slices from within. It is a position that is reflexive about its subjectivity in a way that acknowledges the context within which arguments are proposed. The tomographic also highlights the processes of mediation, the experience of the inside enabled by technological interaction. By embracing and working with processes of mediation, a tomographic approach encourages formal play in which digital technologies can allow for slices of sound and thought from the inside to be configured in numerous ways that parallel the plurality of the listening experience. In this instance, I am using the 360 VR format for its ambisonic potentials to attempt to offer you a mediated experience from within. The tomographic proposal is inevitably incomplete, a slice of a solution to an alternate sound theory that is complemented by other more formal approaches. But for now, I will leave you here, in the centre of this sounding, within layers of listening. Listening in listening.